Hey everybody, Aaron Stinner here. We're here today at Sea Otter Classic Day 2. I'm here with Zach at Wolf Tooth Components and Otso Cycles, and we're going to get into a little conversation, talk about how Zach got into the industry and what's going on at Wolf Tooth. So let's get started.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, great to be here at Sea Otter again this year. And we have a coffee delivery.
We got a coffee delivery, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Pavel.
Yeah.
Oh, and you got one for yourself as well.
I did. Just
cheers.
Cheers.
Very necessary.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you and I know each other pretty well at this point, but our viewers don't know you as well, and I want to give them an intro to Wolf Tooth. Like, obviously, we have the Shopify collective going now, and people can. I think our products are integrating really well. Our customers are getting really excited about it. But maybe give me a little background on you, where you started, what you're doing at Wolf Tooth now, and then we can get into the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, I think as most people in the industry, I had sort of a non-traditional path into the business. I came out of the apparel business, did that for over 10 years, out of school, and then as that kind of morphed and I got a little jittery, wanted to try something different. Decided to ride my bike across the country one summer.
Sweet.
From Minneapolis out to the West Coast, and kind of just like cracked open something in me that I didn't know was there, and started a new exciting life path. I got home, I went to the local bike shop, that 101 Bike Studio.
Okay.
Shout out to y'all. They just moved to a new location in Minneapolis. But walked in there and I was like, hey, you guys, I have always been doing amazing stuff. I love having you as my shop. Want to hire me?
Yeah.
And I can build you a new website. We can do social media. Do all this other stuff. I've got sales and
is that what you focused on in the apparel industry? Was kind of the e-com side? And
it shifted mainly from just standard management, and then eventually brand development work that I was doing with international expansion for some larger retailers. Over into the mainland Chinese market actually. And so that's sort of where a lot of development kind of happened in a short period of time, where we're just figuring everything out on the ground. Literally rebuilding the brands for an audience that really had no visibility to that brand over there. I think there's some common misconceptions amongst U.S. and Western-centric brands that when you open in a new market, everyone knows who you are. And, that's definitely not the case.
Not the case. Yeah.
So,
that's a cool perspective to bring into the bike industry.
Exactly. And so, spent 5 years at 101 Bike Studio.
Cool.
And built a lot of amazing bikes there for a lot of really great customers, and sort of bridging the gap between we were a big Santa Cruz dealer, we were a big Yeti dealer, and these really nice premium mountain bikes, and then bringing in my passion for design and aesthetics and all the things that I kind of nerd out on in my personal life by doing a lot of custom bike work. Especially when the pandemic hit, and it was all right, we have to get creative with what parts we're sourcing, and how we're going to do this. So why don't we just go the extra step and pull together this really unique one-off build, since we're having to do all this work anyway.
Right.
And sort of adding that to the kind of portfolio at the shop there, that wasn't something that we had really done traditionally in the past. For a while, it was something that the shop did a really great job of back in the day, early surly days and things like that. So
those custom one-off builds.
And then 3 years ago, almost to the week here, I started with Wolf Tooth. And so very good friends and now co-workers with the rest of our marketing team here.
Nice.
We kind of pulled in the little of the local groups that both Andrew and I had worked in shops in the Twin Cities, and so came on board here to run marketing for the brand, and help us get to where we're at today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where we intersected, right? Like I'd noticed some things that I think we even followed each other on Instagram before, or right when you started working at Wolftooth, but noticed that you had some, custom builds that you had done on your own personal Instagram page. And then it was cool to I think for Stinner, we were looking for an opportunity, like as a custom frame builder, even moving into stock product, which is what we're focusing on now at Stinner. How do we integrate those custom experiences but create lower touch time? Because as you know, being at 101, like doing those builds, sure, it makes sense during COVID when like everything's delayed and everybody's waiting for everything anyway. Yeah. But like once you get back to normalcy, like how do you create a enjoyable custom purchase and make it easy?
Yeah.
And so it was cool when you and I had chatted and like, well, we're on Shopify, and like how do we make this a seamless, easy experience for people, where we don't have a lot of risk on our end, where we got to carry too much inventory, and the customer has opportunity to pick whatever they want and get whatever they want. And I think obviously us having again custom bike experience and you having your experience at the shop, I felt like that was really synergistic, and it's been great for our customers. They're stoked. So
and I think just being able to leverage those tools that are at our disposal to really, and with the Select and Podium lineup that you have, like you're bringing like this really great price point to some unbelievably, well-crafted bikes. And also then, with our color shop components that we're able to add to that, really just taking, that process that we talked about, that can be a time-consuming, laborious process of like choosing all of the things and having the final product come out the way that you want it. But making that, giving it a really clean interface and basically just like allowing people to have that freedom of choice. To not just end up with the same bike that everybody else that orders it has. They can really add a little bit of their personality to it, which I think is something that is of growing importance when it's a competitive marketplace, but being able to have those extra little special touches just goes a long way in the eyes of the consumer, and I think makes people just more stoked to ride their bike and pull it out of the garage every day and go for a ride. So.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think it has really helped us kind of focus how we take what we did in the past and bring it into the 21st century, and it's been really cool. So obviously, like we've always done the custom bits. You got the headsets, you got the bottom brackets, we got the things that we Tell us where Wolftooth started, like kind of what, I mean, I know the story there, but maybe not all of our viewers do. Where you guys started, where you guys are today, and then like what's at the forefront right now? What are you guys focusing on, and what does that look like?
Like a good number of brands in the business that are, machining components, we started, with a single product. It was a 1x Chainring for our three owners were engineers in the software business, and they met on lunch rides at work, and they made a chainring for their fat bikes so that they could ditch the front derailleur, which at the time was every fat bike pretty much had a 2x drivetrain on it still.
Crazy.
And then started selling them on a bike forum, and kind of exploded from there, and ran the operation out of Mike, one of the owners' basement, for about a year. And then bought their first kind of shotgun warehouse space, and the first mill moved in about a year later, and kind of off to the races from there. Awesome. Now we've got like 380, 400 SKUs and chain rings, and 2 tooth profiles for SRAM and Shimano. Not just compatibility, but optimization. Like really focusing on details, like something that we nerd out about, and it really like plays into everything that we make. Is just sort of like we refuse to just like not optimize it and keep going down that road, and that's kind of been a driving force for the brand and the way that we've kind of chosen product development. Like we've not gone and always like the most like we still don't make a stem, which is like not the most complex thing to make, and it's a product that we really we're going to make it someday. But it's something that keeps getting moved around on the roadmap because there's other opportunities where there's just more optimization to be able to be had. And so that's something where we mentioned like where we started with chainrings, and now with essentially a huge part of our business is now in flat and clipless pedals. And that has been something that is wonderful. The brand, we're scaling, we're really having to ramp up just to keep up with demand for some of these new products. And that was a complex multi-year development process. It was, dozens of iterations and thousands and thousands of miles of product testing. And that was the first product also from us where it wasn't just our R&D and our riding and our buddies, testing stuff, and we were actually able to leverage like our growing network of athletes and professional riders that we've had the great benefit of working with now for really 2 full seasons and going into a third, where they were able to chip in on the development of the product and really help fine tune it in that last step to get it across the finish line.
So because I'm interested in it, like obviously the pedal is really big for you guys, and as somebody who we just wrapped up our full suspension, that's here, leveraging multiple partners and like trying to make things that are more difficult. Like the pedal has, obviously like you guys have a lot of control over headsets and bottom brackets, and it's a bearing and it's an aluminum cup, and you guys kind of have probably a recipe on how you get those live, but the pedal's got, there's stamped parts, there's springs, there's like all these mechanisms in there. I'm guessing you guys don't make every piece on the pedal?
Correct, yeah. Okay. So we machine the pedal bodies in-house, the axles in-house.
Yeah.
And that's the stainless and the tie axles that we have on our we'll touch on Mark Zero later, but on those pedals as well. So those are all coming from our machine shop or one just across town in Minneapolis in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And then the stamped parts and the pedal hardware is coming from an overseas supplier to finish the product off, and that's just like we don't have the tooling and the required scaling up to do that part. Nets you out in a product that's not competitively priced. So we did leverage building relationships with really great partners on that product to be able to supply those key components.
Cool.
And, doing all of the big machining lifts ourselves, and then all of the assembly and QC and everything happens in-house.
Yeah, I was gonna say that all happens in-house, right? Yeah. Okay. And how many parts are in a pedal?
Oh, geez, on the spot here.
Sorry, general ballpark.
There's quite a lot. The binding hardware, you've got probably 12 components in there. And then, you've got axle, pedal body, end cap, 3 bearings, a bushing. So I would say that there's, 25 components,
it's a lot.
For a casual estimate. But,
right, and you got this like small assembly that fits in a little box, and like, I don't, when I saw you guys come out with it, I was like, damn, that wasn't easy.
It was a big lift, and I think part of the thing that that gets a little bit lost in machining components is like the pedal. And obviously our Delete pedal, our smallest model for gravel racing, is the fastest to machine. But they're taking like dozens of minutes to machine per pedal body, and the shift downhill pedal is like, it takes a long time to machine that block of aluminum down and get all that relief cut out for weight savings and get it to the final product. And so that really it takes real time. And so those machines are running almost 24/7 now.
We've got, I think, did you guys have to get more mills?
Well, yeah, we did. We just installed our 4th automation as well. So we've got robot feeding multiple machines that can do different ops. And so op 1 will happen here, the robot will move it, flip it for op 2. So there's, we're building in a lot of efficiencies there, and we've got, I believe, 8 mills dedicated just to pedals now. Most of those are 2 machine cells with an automation kind of moving parts.
Moving it around.
And adding more as we speak. We just brought in a new one last week, and we got someone dancing over here. What is going on? This place is going crazy.
It's hard to hide around.
It's awfully early for that. And even more. We actually just did a large remodel at the warehouse.
Cool.
And so we added kind of a second mezzanine level to be able to move some of our production offices out closer to the machine shop. Just for ease of access. We kind of rearranged a little bit with our welding and cage bending. And then that gave us the ability to increase the amount of space that we have in our main office just for headcount there. Plan growth for the future in there. And then also we walled off the machine shop, gave it extra room to grow, but also it's like eerily quiet now in assembly and shipping, which is like crazy. You can like go out there and like hear a pin drop almost.
Nice.
Which has been
a little more elbow room.
Yeah, it's just been kind of nice to have that reorganization. And we were in a spot where it's like, okay, we either move to a bigger facility, and I know you all just did a move as well.
Yeah.
You
don't want to move, and you guys have even bigger and more rigging and more of that. Like that's. I thought our move was expensive. I don't want to think about you.
Yeah, and so it was either and really like it was either facilities that were way too big, and it would take us who knows how long to be able to really fill that space, or ones that were about the same as ours. Just didn't make sense at the time. So, and you know, obviously having Otso, our bike brand, in-house with us as well, like we were able to give them a little bit more, you know, space and flexibility in that reorg.
Cool.
And so, yeah, we're just kind of, you know, finding as we grow and the business evolves. That we're able to just kind of like take stock. We're you know, not a particularly like we tend to overanalyze things and like think about a decision to death until we're ready to make that decision. And I think that plays in our favor in a lot of ways, where we're you know, really off the gun on like a lot of development and like meeting the industry where it's at, meeting the riders and racers where they are at and where they will be and what they want. But also somehow tempering that with like a bunch of like Midwestern, like, you know, taking pause and taking stock of a lot of things, just to make sure that we're not, you know, just like throwing all of our eggs in a particular basket, or making a decision that, you know, we're not 100% on. So, which is kind of an interesting balance, but we're able to achieve that, you know, really well with, you know, we've got a lot of people in the company that wear a lot of hats, and you know, the marketing team is really integrated with the sales team and vice versa, and we're all kind of, you know, it's a small company still. You know, we have grown and continue to grow. You know,
growing rapidly.
I believe, you know, we're about 60 headcount total. Between the machine shop and
how
shipping
big's the
assembly.
shop now?
Total, I think we're at 18 machines. Lathes and mills.
But like square footage, you guys are in like.
I actually don't have that answer.
18 machines though. That's like, you know, a significant size. You're probably at more than 10,000 square feet. Less than probably 30 or somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there.
We still need to come out and do a shop tour. I want to come and see it.
Yeah, absolutely. You should come out for Schwam again.
Let's do
That's
it.
a great event, a good excuse to fly into Minneapolis and go up for Schwam again. So, or Iceman even.
I know, I've heard
take
it.
the big drive.
But, so obviously, like, and you guys come out at an exceeding rate, I think. So obviously thinking about the products that you guys are releasing and being very thoughtful about what you guys are choosing and how you're doing it, not choosing a stem, doing pedals. And I know what that takes internally. You know, we're a small team, so we can make a lot of, you know, decisions pretty quickly, but also like sometimes you just have to take pause and be cautious. But you guys come out with a lot of new products during the year, and they're always like hitting the mark, because I do think they're all things that people actually do need and want to see. So how, when you guys are in the room and you're trying to decide on a product, like, I know, you know, some other companies may be like, well, we're a bearing company, so we're focusing on bearings, or like, oh no, we're a pedal company, so we're focusing on pedals. But you guys, like, everything from like, you know, a dropper seat post all the way down to you know, a bearing headset or a bottom bracket. Like, what is the guiding light at Wolftooth right now on what we're working on next? Like, how do you guys,
I think,
what does that conversation look like?
Part of the thing that works in our favor at the end of the day is that we do move things around a lot. Development time, as you know, can vary greatly, and things can move forward very quickly and then slow down for months and years, years at a time. It seems like. So, you know, it almost plays in our favor where we always have a couple really big, you know, tier one launches in the hopper. We have a product roadmap that we constantly like work through and update as we add and launch things. But we really kind of move things around, and, you know, not that any launch is unimportant, but you know, there's smaller components or new colors of something that we already make that we can kind of like drop in, you know, when it works. And a lot of that is dictated by the machine shop. And it's like, okay, this is scheduled out, you know, however many months in advance. And, you know, also finding out now, like with, you know, we're allocating all these resources to pedal production. And now it's like, okay, we still have to keep our chainrings in stock, and we still have to make sure bottom brackets are going, and, you know, all of this other things. So, you know, those are the growing pains that you know, we say it's a good problem to have, but at the same time, it's like we want to make sure that somebody goes on the website and they want a component, it's available. Or one of our distributors has it, or a local shop or something like that. So, that absolutely is some of the math that we're currently, you know, wrestling with a little bit, just keeping that going. But like, product development writ large is basically, you know, engineering team and like we have a kind of a meeting of the minds and say like, you know, this is something that we feel really we want to take on.
Yeah.
You know, and it's almost like, you know, we see them all as sort of, you know, problems or challenges to solve. I think, and being an engineering forward company, that's kind of how we approach it. And it's like, you know, some of them we scope out and we go through prototyping and we're like, we maybe can't make this enough. We can't do this differently enough or better than, you know, a competitor that already does it very well. So maybe we don't pursue that. Or we, you know, put it on pause and revisit it when there's new technology or there's, you know, a new opportunity comes along. Or we work in a different material, you know, we're in aluminum and kind of stainless steel and now a little bit of titanium. You know, well, what does it look like if we do that in carbon or something where that's very new that we haven't done before. So
okay, no, that makes sense. And so obviously, I was really intrigued by the Mark Zero stuff that you guys came out with. Obviously, just like pushing the limits. Was that just? It felt to me, and you could kind of see it as like. As somebody who's like kind of an engineer and like iterates and tweaks, and it seemed like you guys probably had a lot of those ideas in the hopper already, things that were like kind of ruminating, like when you came out with the pedal, like how light can we make the pedal? Like you're like a bottom bracket, how light can we make the bottom bracket? Was that driven just by like internal mechanisms from everybody in the shop thinking about how you could like basically, you know, get your weight weenie on and just make it light? Or was it like athlete, like I know Wout Van Aert was like on a pedal during cross season, like was it driven by athletes wanting something lighter? Was it marginal gains? Or was it just like, you know, we can really push the limits on this, like let's just see how far we can take it?
Yeah, I think the idea came, you know, 2-ish years ago, a little over 2 years ago. It kind of came just from like myself and Kurt, one of the other marketers at the brand, our marketing director, and we just sort of were like, we really wanted, like, what if we just did like let the engineers just like run loose,
just
create kind of a, you know, create a sub brand where we just sort of say like, okay, like let's not focus on minimums, let's not focus on, you know, all the things that really make sense.
Like too much
to make a product
like,
at scale. Who
cares? Like,
you know?
make it.
And say like, okay, like let's just make the best possible versions of some components that we already make. This kind of co-developed like while we were developing pedals. So it's like, okay, like we already knew that we were going to make this lineup of control, delete pedals, and then shift the downhill pedal. What if we just like try and make them as light as possible? And so we're kind of doing that at the same time. And then how do we do that? And then, you know, what other components deserve this treatment? There's obviously some that are mainly an aesthetic change, but also, you know, like our rotor lock rings are 60% lighter than our standard one, or 40% lighter than our standard rotor lock rings, even though it's like a 4.5 gram difference. It's like, okay, that's still a significant difference. And, you know, our customer base has grown and evolved, you know, in part due to our partnership with Visma Lisa Bike. Like we have a big European audience that is, you know, now really into Wolf Tooth, and they really value marginal gains. And so it's like, okay, like we want to meet our customers where they're at, and like people want to save 5 grams if they can save 5 grams. You know, and then in the case of the pedals, it's like 65 grams, you know, over the standard pedal, which is not insignificant. And if you compare it to, you know, the competition, it's 150, sometimes 200 grams lighter than a competitor pedal if you're talking about the delete for gravel racing.
Pretty cool.
You know, of course, like yesterday, 10,000 feet of vert, and it's all really punchy, intense climbs. Like that all adds up at the end of the day for the particular type of rider. Not everybody, but. Are
you finding that your athletes are choosing to run that stuff?
And you know, it's a situation where like, you know, we, that collection originally was going to launch, you know, 6 months earlier than it did, and we needed to make sure that the tie axles didn't break. And it was like, all right, like this has to pass the same testing that we use on our stainless axles, and we need these to be able to be ridden and abused, and like any other component, and it's got to, you know, exceed the ISO standards and all that, you know, our testing metrics. And so, having all of the testing in-house, having all of the, you know, we're able to, as you mentioned with Stinner's operation, like we can iterate very quickly. And that's something that allows us to kind of have that rapid, rapid fire production cadence, and kind of all plays into it. So Mark Zero was really a passion project. It was all of us sort of
all those
seeing
things coming together.
Seeing like, all right, this is something that we kind of did for ourselves, but also just seeing where we could take the brand. And I think, you know, the really exciting thing now that it's already there and we're going to continue building it is, you know, new products. Some of the things first to market are going to launch as Mark Zero. So there's going to be products that we know we can do at this like extremely high level that we're going to do, and then we're going to figure out a way to like make that more affordable and like make it easier to mass produce, you know, in quantity, and then bring that price down and then launch like a standard version of it. And then some of the products that we come out with in the future will then, you know, get a Mark Zero treatment when we kind of have the time to analyze and say like, okay, like where can we shave weight or add some sort of performance value to it.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, and like I know, especially in the smaller community, like one-man band type places, like it's a little easier to make those products because you're not relying, you know, you don't have a team of 60 people and you don't have, there's like a lot of economic factors that you have to take into when you grow a company and all those other things that come around where it makes it really hard to focus on those projects. So just as somebody who does make stuff, like you watch that and you're like, that's really cool because I know how much time and energy that takes and like how kind of disruptive it can be. And then like, you know, especially for like, you know, your team and, you know, the guys running the show, you know, it's allowing for that to happen, but also making sure that it's like economically viable for you guys to do it. It's really cool. So it's like watching somebody that's growing and scaling, but still is able to kind of commit to that, like, hey, we're going to push the limit still and offer this like super high-end flagship product.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like, you know, we're all in the bike industry because we love what we do and we love riding and we love, you know, getting more people out on bikes and enjoying all that comes with that. And so there's no reason, you know, like, and we, you know, everybody gets caught up in that, and you know, your business is growing, and you're dealing with like all the things that come with that, and you know, you need to make it viable, you need to provide for your employees, and you need to make sure that, you know, everything's moving in the right direction. But at the end of the day, like, if we're not making things, you know, just to smile at the end of the day and be like, you know what, like this is rad. This is really cool. And you know, there's no reason not to do that. You know, we can't do all of the crazy ideas. Like I'm constantly peppering
like, what about this?
The development team. Like I'm sometimes like the worst enemy at the office where I'm just like, hey, we should do this. And people are like, no. Like, come on, man.
Stop.
Like you've given us like 8 ideas today. And like
they're all striking out.
You know, but that's, you know, we'll do a few of those eventually. You know, and it's something where and everybody, you know, the brand is all made up of riders, and so our whole development process is driven by what we see and what we experience, and
it's important. So, you gotta do those things. I'm glad you're the guy in the room pushing. You know, it's good to, even if they don't stick, like it's what makes a company like Wolf Tooth really cool.
Absolutely.
So anything new that people should keep an eye out for here at the show?
There's definitely a lot of newness here. Yeah, I mean, we've got our full Mark Zero collection on display. That stuff is fresh as of about a month ago. The new shift pedal launched like 2 weeks ago. It's super exciting. We've got, you know, new bikes from Otso, our bike brand, and then there's some stuff hiding in plain sight in the booth if you're at Sea Otter.
Some Easter eggs?
Not allowed to talk about it yet, but yeah, keep your eyes and ears open, and you might see something pretty exciting. So
I'm excited. One last question. So Minneapolis, like, huge cycling scene, right? You got QBP out of there. You got like, you guys are there. There's a bunch of other like small makers, bike shops. Like it is like a hotbed. Embarrassingly, I have not been to Minneapolis.
We're gonna fix that.
We're gonna fix that, and I'm gonna go. We're gonna do a shop tour and come see you guys. Like, what's going down in Minneapolis? Where like, I mean, obviously you guys are choosing to stay there. You're not relocating. Like the manufacturing is obviously working for you guys. You're able to hire people. Like, somebody who lives in Southern California in like a really high cost of living area, it's like obviously like always a topic of conversation for myself. Where I'm like, does this make sense to be doing this here? But I have a really good community in Santa Barbara. They really support us, and so I've been able to kind of grow the brand there. But I think that's like a very unique thing. But like Minneapolis, like it's all going down there, and like you guys get snow and you're freezing like 6 months out of the year. Like if you were to pick like a cycling destination, you're like, it's probably not going to be Minneapolis. But like clearly something's in the water, something's going down there. Like what's up in Minneapolis?
I think it's just such a, I mean, major credit to, you know, decades of really great urban development in the city. Like our infrastructure is impressive. And so, you know, the fact that we have the bike infrastructure to facilitate, you know, a really great commuter community. You know, the city isn't super sprawling. You know, and it's, you know, it's about 500,000 people. Metro area is bigger than that, but like our office is 16 miles away from my house.
Okay.
But it's a really nice commute.
Yeah.
Like I can take either a protected bike lane or a bike path the whole way.
That's awesome.
For the most part, there's a couple neighborhoods you need to snake through and whatnot when you get across the Minnesota River, but that just gives people access. And then we've got local mountain bike trail building community that has got dozens and dozens of miles of single track within either a couple minute drive or riding distance of where people live.
Cool.
And it's kind of, each neighborhood in the city is like quite close to something.
Yeah.
And so people have got options.
Yeah.
Gravel racing grew up in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And so, we had events like the Almanzo.
Yep.
Way back at the beginning, we're racing that thing on 28s on, cyclocross bikes. Or 33s. Back in the day, like most people started that genre. And so, we've ridden that wave a little bit and kind of feel some pride in like kind of, that aspect of it. But overall, it's just, the infrastructure is there for it to support it.
Cool.
The community really just like loves to be outside. I think the winters give us like a really good reason to make the most of our
Summers.
good weather in the spring, summer, and fall. And I also think that everyone there is also used to, it's cold outside, but like, I want to ride my bike.
Yeah.
I rode the trainer 3 days this week. Like, I'm going to get the fat bike out. We got a little snow. Like, there's trails. I can almost ride single track, like, all the way across town.
That's
like, just
cool.
on some little, bootleg trails and things like that. So, it's Minneapolis is an amazing place. The community is super strong.
Yeah.
We all kind of rally together for one another, and cycling's just always been a part of it.
Yeah.
I've been there since 2005.
Okay.
Moved up to the Twin Cities, between St. Paul and Minneapolis, and it's just continued to grow. We've saw this huge wave pre-pandemic, like 2016, 17, 18, like it felt like there's this huge community. And then it sort of like ebbed a little bit, and now like it feels like it's roaring back, and it's like a new generation is kind of coming in and like taking up the reins. And honestly, it starts with like alley cat races and like all this. It's cool. Like now that I'm getting older, and like I was that age, doing that, you know, 20 years ago or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And now I'm seeing like all these kids that were like I was back then, like super stoked on track bikes, and then they're showing up at Thursday night cross races in the fall, and now they're racing Minnesota Mountain Bike Series stuff, and so it's cool just to see all that grow and continue to evolve and to be a big part of it. I think one of the things that we're the most proud of is being able to be a big part of the cycling community regionally, and also in Wisconsin and in northern Minnesota, and there's just so many nice destination places to ride, as well, just outland in the States, up there around Lake Superior,
I
Michigan too. Like it's beautiful.
Gotta come check it out. So I'm coming out. I'm getting on a plane. What bike am I bringing? I've got one bike. I can only bring one bike.
Oh man, that's a really good question.
Okay.
I would say. I would maybe, now that we've got the option, like a drop bar mountain bike might be cool.
Okay.
Just so you can like rip pretty much anything.
Okay.
And not feel like you're missing out, but or just like an XC hardtail or something would be pretty great. All the mountain biking is pretty doable on that. Cool. There's some gravity up in the North Shore area that's you'd want a bigger bike on, but you could still get by if you're a good rider. But or if you're really looking just to like cover mileage, like a capable gravel bike is great, and it gets you anywhere you want to go.
Okay. So maybe I'm driving out and I'm bringing a couple bikes.
Maybe.
Yeah. Right on. Sweet.
Go park at a trailhead, do some laps, and then do a bike packing trip or something.
Yeah.
So
I like it.
Yeah.
Cool, dude. Well, thank you for the time.
Absolutely,
I appreciate
man.
it. This is pleasurable. Thank you guys. Thanks for checking in. Check out Wolftooth. Check out our site. You can see all the Wolftooth stuff. Click and add. If you enjoyed this conversation, you want to hear more from Zach, we're going to go out and do a shop tour at some point. Add some comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you guys out there. Thank you.